back to the EXP Podcast. I'm joined once again by Tim and Luan for another exciting episode where we're going to be talking about a career in games. I have two wonderful guests with us this week, Clinton and Lincoln, and they're going to introduce themselves. Clinton, why don't you start us off?
Sure, yeah. So, my name is Clinton Crumpler. I'm the owner and founder of Dekogon Studios, and then currently I'm also working as a principal artist through Dekogon with Midwinter Entertainment.
And Lincoln, what about you?
I'm an assistant art director at Tuque Games. I've been in the game industry for maybe about 15 years now. I've worked for, most notably, the studios I've worked for are Warner Brothers Games, Relic, Electronic Arts, and I'm currently at Tuque Games in Montreal.
All right, then. So to start our talk about kind of building a career in games, it's probably a good place to start with kind of how you got to where you are today and your guys' kind of journeys. So where you started, kind of how that went through. So you mentioned a little bit about kind of what you've been doing, Lincoln. So why don't you kind of continue that for us and give us the full rundown of your history?
Well, I started as kind of a prop artist at this company called Piranha in Vancouver, and slowly kind of transitioned into concept art while I was there, and then moved on to outsourcing more prop art, and then I kind of got a big break after maybe like 6 years in the game industry. I think I was at Relic in Vancouver at the time, and got like a full-time job at Ubisoft. I think this is like 2012, something like that, in Montreal with Tim Simpson. Actually, he was my roommate at the time. So he actually got a job at Ubisoft, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to come with me?" And I'd just broken up with my girlfriend, and he was like, "Dude, there isn't a better time to leave Vancouver than right now." So
Tim listens to this, and he's like, "I remember."
Yeah, so it was great. And this is actually way back in. I was at Relic, and Relic got they were owned by THQ at the time, and THQ was having like drastic financial problems, and they ended up laying everybody off. Like, even though they knew that me and Tim were going to Ubisoft, like they basically still took us in a room. They're like, "Yeah, we're still paying you severance." So, nice. They gave us severance, even though we were leaving anyways. And, we went to Vegas, and then I proceeded to get, a 4 of a kind nice. At one of the casinos there on like the day where you get paid for getting a 4 of a kind, and, made a bunch of money, and then, went to Ubisoft. It was really fun.
So step one is gamble everything away.
Yeah. That's going to spend severance.
Step one is gamble and make money. And if you're bad at it, then don't proceed to gamble.
Just take the money and run in that case.
Yeah. So over the years, I've kind of I've dabbled between like concept art, lighting, level art, props, technical art, and like all of those different things have kind of put me on the path where I am right now, which is assistant art director at Tuque. So, at Tuque, it's a smaller studio, so I get to kind of, have my finger in a bunch of different pies at the same time. So, I get to do technical art once in a while, lighting, level art, some prop stuff, get to help out with pipelines. And, it's pretty cool. I like doing a bit of everything. I don't like doing one thing. So, it's kind of nice,
Is there like a thing that you really like doing that you don't get to do as much anymore?
Not really. Like, I kind of get to do everything where I am right now. Awesome. And that's part of like why I love it so much, right? Like, I think if I was at like a big studio like Electronic Arts in Vancouver, and I was just modeling like hockey jerseys or something like that, I wouldn't like it, like I love Electronic Arts, but like if I was just doing like that one thing and I was very, very hyper specialized, then, I don't think I'd be nearly as happy.
Makes sense.
I can understand that, to be honest. Like, just doing the same thing over and over again, it could be a bit
Yeah,
tiring.
like you need variety, right? And like if you kind of like max out, like if you get super specialized, you kind of max out like your skill set after a while, and you kind of need to keep constantly learning, and like with the endless kind of technological advancement that's always happening, like being able to constantly learn new things and learn new techniques that improve the speed of your pipeline or something like that you kind of need to do that, right? And it's fun to do because you're like, oh wow, that thing that took me like 10 days to do before, I can do in the click of a button, which that stuff's super interesting to me.
All right, and we'll throw it over to Clinton as well to kind of give us his story.
Sure. Yeah. So I started out originally actually going to school for graphic design. So I went to school for graphic design for 4 years, and then completed my bachelor's in that. And then I got out and I was like, I hate graphic design. I don't want to do it. I think it's amazing. I think the people that do it are super talented, but you have to be like the top 10% to make a great career out of it, like to be really successful. And I didn't feel like I was quite there. And also I just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like something was lacking with like how I received satisfaction through art. And so I decided to go back to school for animation, and then I got my undergraduate in animation as well, and I realized I didn't like that either. Burning through cash, just burning through it. And I was like, well, okay, I did find something in that though that I definitely found gratifying, which is like modeling, texturing, lighting, and just like scene composition and telling stories visually through 3D. And so that kind of led me to my graduate degree, which was game art and like a design theory. And I've never been into like big into programming or coding or anything like that, but I do like the way that there are some technical abilities that kind of sit well with art, and I kind of like that in between spot for most of the things I was creating. So from there I graduated from SCAD with my master's, and then I got a job from a studio called Army Game Studio in Alabama. So it's a smaller studio, but they were doing like propaganda games and things like that for the States. And I'm a pacifist myself, so it was kind of a weird fit, but I enjoyed the work nonetheless. It was fun to still learn a lot. And then from there I moved on to, and that was just like for props and textures and like working in environments. And then from there I moved on to a studio in San Francisco called Kixeye. And that was like a mobile studio to start out with, and they were working in Unreal or UDK at the time. And then at the time also they had some kind of connection to Epic Games, and so we got a really early demo to practice and try out Unreal 4 before it came out. Like I think it was about a year and a half before it came out. Damn. And so it was really fun to work on because I had been working in UDK before that, and so it was a lot of similarities, but there was a lot of like really cool new tech and stuff like that. And so we actually switched over to working on this like kind of high-end tank game, which was really fun. And so I worked on that for quite some time. And I also was doing a bunch of like contract work at the time. I actually worked for Tuque at one point on World War Machine a couple years ago.
Did you work together?
No. This was just like, I don't even think we overlapped. I think this had to be at least 7, 8, maybe even 9 years ago. It's quite some time. And then I was doing a bunch of like contract work like that. And then also I started teaching at Digital Tutors and a couple other things. And then kind of after that, I worked there for, I think, 3.5 years on that game, the tank game. And then they decided to end up shelving it, and they laid us all off, the normal story.
And then you went to Vegas.
Yeah. Exact same things, like, yeah. But yeah, so that was, I think that was kind of a pretty big turning point for me, because I feel like any good artist is in the industry long enough is going to get laid off eventually. It's just the nature of the beast, which is kind of unfortunate. But like, I feel like you kind of make or break yourself at that point. Like you kind of get back up and like, just like, well, okay, I now know how this works, and I'm just going to make the best of it. Or you kind of like just give up. You're like, this isn't for me.
That was my first job, actually. Like within 2 months, it was being laid off. So I kind of agree with you there. It's the make or break moment.
For sure, yeah. And I was actually talking to my wife about this last night because I remember I got laid off and I was living in San Francisco, and it's very expensive to live in San Francisco. So I remember I had just moved to the big city, like in San Francisco. Like, I'd only been there for 3 years. So it was like a pretty big change for me from moving from like Virginia to Savannah to Alabama to all these kind of smaller towns to like San Francisco, which is like vastly more expensive and bigger and much harder to do, like figure out like your expenses and everything like that. So I wasn't very good at like keeping an eye on like how much I was spending and stuff. And so like as soon as I got laid off, I was like, oh crap, I only have like enough money for like 1 month of rent left.
Shit.
So I just remember like my wife took my girlfriend at the time, and my wife now, she took me to pizza, and she was like, do you want one slice or two? I was like, I think I can only afford like a one. And I was like, that's all the money I have left. And I was like,
times, man.
Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. So, but yeah, I mean, like after that, I kind of just like made the decision to kind of be more of a proponent for myself, to just like make sure like I always like I looked out for me and like made sure like I was checking on my own career before I like assumed that the company was going to take care of me. And so that after that I moved to we moved to Austin, and I started working at Bethesda. And that was really fun. I really liked Austin. Austin's a super great town. And I really liked working at Bethesda. That was fun. It's definitely a different experience. And then, after that we moved, I had a friend, I was at Bethesda for, I think a year and a half. And I had a friend contact me and say, hey man, like we went to school together, and he was like, hey, we need a guy that's like sort of technical, sort of artist to work on, Gears 4. And I was like, oh man, that sounds like a dream. I've just always been a huge Gears fan. So, and I went to Canada when I was 6 years old on a field trip, and I was like, man, people here are so nice. And I had that like always stuck in my head that like I wanted to move to Canada. So I was like, man, this is like a perfect opportunity.
Dreams
So
come true.
I convinced my wife to move, and we moved up here. And I worked at Microsoft for a few years. And we decided we loved Canada so much we didn't want to move back. So we've been ever since. And then that's also here was where I formed Dekogon, which is a United States company because I'm originally from the States. But we formed Dekogon, and then I started working with Microsoft through Dekogon, and then eventually found my way to Midwinter Entertainment, where I'm at right now as a principal environment artist.
What a journey you both have had, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, you've been all around the planet, all these different big companies that everyone dreams to go to. And
All these life-changing events here and there.
Vegas, squandering all this money or winning all the money.
One or two slices of pizza.
Time played. But I think the most common thing that you both said was like you've done a bit of everything. So Lincoln's done prop art, concept art, 3D modeling. He enjoys the tech side, and vice versa. Same for Lincoln. So I guess my question is, because a lot of students, especially in juniors, they don't know what to tailor their skills to. Like I get asked all the time, so I'm sure you will. But like, should I have environments on my portfolio or props or like tech stuff? So like, how did you kind of progress your skill set to where you are now? I guess we could start with Lincoln on that.
Sure. I think the hardest thing is actually realizing what you want to do. It's like, what are you super passionate about? What's your favorite? What's the thing that you can continue doing and practicing for the next 5 years? Maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 5, however long it takes you. Something that you're so passionate about that, every second day after work, you're going home and working on it in your spare time to create a portfolio. If you're not passionate about it, if you're kind of semi on the fence of like, oh, what should I do? I don't know. Then, I don't think it's going to work. Like you have to really devote yourself to learning the techniques and creating the portfolio to follow through and kind of elevate you towards the specialization that you choose, right?
Makes sense. I can see that.
Yeah. Sorry. What was the question?
I was mainly like how you kind of select what to work on in your spare time, because like students they always say it, like, do I work on environments or props? And I think working to your passion makes sense.
Yeah,
like people really understand how to select that sort of stuff.
typically in your spare time. Yeah. If it's a spare time thing where, you're not in the industry yet, but you're kind of trying to figure it out. Yeah. Like if you're like super passionate about something, you're always kind of going to follow through on it. And, motivation might be a factor. You might be lacking motivation, or you might not feel like working on it, but still be passionate about it. I don't know, just force yourself to do it anyways. And yes, I know it's not as simple as that. I'm an artist too. But I think like if, it's legit. If you can actually force yourself to start something and then, see results, as soon as you see results,
that's the hardest part, man.
Yeah. It's going to create that perpetual motion of, oh shit, I have a 6-pack now. I have a 6-pack. Oh, wow. Okay. I need to keep doing this. I'm feeling better. I don't feel sluggish, like as soon as you see results in like almost anything that you're passionate about, you're always going to start to follow through, right?
Definitely. And I guess that kind of runs in line with Clinton and Dekogon, because I imagine building a company from the ground up, you need like a shit ton of motivation and just drive to get it off the ground. Because I feel like experience points are going through that, but I have no idea how you got Dekogon off the ground.
Man, I wish I had 400 hours in the day instead of 24. Yeah, first off, having a patient wife definitely helps. Because I don't think I could have done it otherwise, for sure. Because she's definitely patient with me and the time I spend on this stuff. But yeah, I think it's like Lincoln was saying, just really perseverance. And like a lot of days you'll get up and you're like, I just don't feel like doing this today. But like those are the days you need to try even harder, because like you kind of have to overcome those hurdles and humps to like just push on through. And it's like you're saying, it's like if you're passionate about it, it'll show. And like with like Dekogon, it was like a labor of love. Like I really enjoyed working with a lot of artists, and Dekogon was kind of formed out of that, with just being able to work with people kind of all over the world that really had like skills and abilities that were kind of untapped because of the nature of the market and having to be on site and everything like that. Which now it's kind of ironic that we're all like switching to remote work with all the COVID stuff. But yeah, I think in regards to like what you should be working on in your spare time as like a junior or like a entry level artist, I think the biggest thing I always tell my students is like always focus on like what makes you happy, what makes you content throughout the day, and also like if you looked at your portfolio, like what would you hire you, like do you seem to yourself as like a hireable like individual? Like are you pumped when you look at your own portfolio? And the answer is no. Then you need to keep pushing yourself. Because that's really gonna show with the employer if you're hireable or not, or if you're in that position to be ready for like a production role.
Yeah, just to add on to that, like you don't like artists love to self-deprecate.
Oh yeah, all the time,
every day, man, every day.
Yeah, and sorry, in case anybody misheard, I didn't say self-defecate. I said self-deprecate.
But sometimes,
depending on the day.
Once in a while, it's happened 3 times throughout. Like I don't know. That's seriously like if you can catch those thoughts, and there's tons of videos out there on like imposter syndrome, and even like before I walked into this podcast, I was like, oh my God, I just kind of had this subconscious thought of they'll discover you.
You're found out.
And like every artist has that. So like, figure out a way to ignore all that. It's like, it's just the worst thing that you can do. And as soon as you can identify it and kind of move past it, the better, right?
Definitely.
Absolutely. I think having a goal helps, right? Like having an idea of what you want to get to 2 years from now, 5 years from now, or even like short term, like what you want your portfolio to be 6 months from now. I think having that sort of solid goal helps. But like so many people that we talk to, even through EXP and everything, they all struggle with motivation. And quite often I tell them, like, just persevere, man. Like it's hard, and it's not, it's kind of not shit advice, but just keep going. Just focus on what's good about your work and just keep trying to push yourself to that goal. But yeah, it is hard to get that motivation, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's always too. It's like you want to be hard on yourself, but not too hard on yourself, right? It's like it's a tricky balance to find because like it's like almost mixed messages when sometimes you'll be like working with a student and you'll say like, oh, there's like the ebb and flow of like the artist, which is like, you know, you make something and you're like, oh, this looks great. And then you reach that hump and you come back down where it's like, oh, this looks awful. But then you learn the most in that kind of like crappy time. And then you like come back up to the top of the hump. You're like, oh, this is looking great. And so it's like just learning to like kind of work with those ebbs and flows to know like, oh yeah, I am getting better. I am improving regardless of like if I thought the last thing I did was better than this thing, I'm still learning something new through every kind of experience I'm having.
And just to add on to that, like, I think the times where I've learned like the most, you know, not just in art, in basically anything in my life, it was when I was just completely fucked.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's like when your back is to the corner, you just got laid off from your job, you have no money, and you kind of like, you have to figure it out, right? So you have to learn new techniques. You have to figure out what you need to do to actually get by. And, you know, and in the moment, you're like freaking out and it's very stressful and anxiety ridden. But after, you know, you can be like, holy shit, like I did that. Okay. You know, it's a reason to be proud of yourself, right?
Definitely. I mean, those are scary times, man, when you have no money and you don't know the next step.
Oh, yeah.
Where the next meal's coming from, I can imagine.
Yeah. It's hard too, because like when as like a game artist, like it's like I feel like for a long time there was always like this kind of weird stipulation behind like when you like, oh, I make game art for games or I work on games. It's like it wasn't taken as seriously like 10 years ago. So like when you're broke and you're telling people that you're like making games, everyone's like, that's laughable. Like you should maybe get a real job.
That argument's quite frustrating.
I always found it really interesting. I'm like, you go to a party and there's some I was about to use the C word, but I shouldn't do that. I am after all. That's like, oh, so you play video games all day?
Okay.
And you're like, yeah, no, I do technical art for video games. I do the 3D art. I create the environments, etc. Like you have to like justify your existence. You know, yeah. I always
like trying to explain to your mother. No, I don't paint pictures all day.
Yeah.
There's so much more to it.
Unless you're a concept artist, then you might be painting pictures.
Even then, that's so much more to that. Like figuring out like all of these little things about the game, right? But like,
yeah. So because I guess me, Luan, and Tim have we have a bunch of meetings now and then. But you guys, I mean, Lincoln's art director, like assistant art director, and Clinton, you own your own studio. So how many meetings do you guys have on a daily basis?
Woo wee. Like, I'll let you go first. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. I think maybe about 30 to 40% of my time is devoted to meetings. But I have my producer. His name is Vincent Robichaud. I used to work with him back at Warner Brothers Games, and he was like my art lead before. So he's kind of like half art lead, half producer, and that guy makes my life possible. He basically like alleviates, 50% of the meetings that I would have to have by being there and then kind of relaying the information to me or organizing things. He basically makes my life easier so that I can actually do more or devote more of my time to creating art, which
that's what you want.
Which thank God, right? Yeah, like I like being in meetings. I like giving feedback once in a while, depending on the meeting. But it gets to a point where you're like, okay, some days 70%. You're like, holy shit! Like I need to do this. I need to do this, but I can't. Because there isn't enough time in a day unless you want to work.
Yeah, you need like 400. You need those 400-hour days, man.
Yeah, no joke. Man, that's so true though, man. Like having a good like producer or art coordinator or whatever, like man, that makes such a difference. Like we have Taylor Brown and Dekogon, and man, like I couldn't do like you're saying, like any of the things I get done without Taylor, and so like it makes a big difference. Like having those people and those roles that really make sure that the wheels are like greased, man, it just makes the world a difference. And I've been at studios where there've been like pretty much no meetings, and I've been at studios where there's like way too many meetings. And I would say like there's definitely a sweet spot, but like there's definitely like a merit to having meetings, because many times when I've been at studios where there's no meetings, it's like, oh man, like no one knows what the hell's going on. Like no one has any visibility on what some other guy like literally next to the person is making. And so it's like, why did we all make this same asset? Like why do we have so many like dumpsters? There's no need for this many dumpsters. So it's just like that clarity makes a big difference.
And it helps for getting that record of what you agreed to do, right? Because like sometimes you might get a designer or something that said, "Oh, why are you doing that?" It's like, because you told me there's meeting.
Exactly. Yeah, it keeps.
I also think it's.
Go ahead.
It's about kind of analyzing what you're best at, right? It's like I'm good at kind of being in meetings and giving feedback, but I'm a lot better at actually doing art. So like if we can kind of come to an arrangement where you know somebody's there to alleviate that responsibility for me and get me doing what I'm good at, then you know it kind of works out for everybody, right? So it's just kind of finding that middle ground for you know where your value to the company or to yourself or whatever you like doing or you know whatnot, where that comes into play and how you can mediate it to work for you and the company at the same time.
For sure. Yeah, I find I actually struggle with that every day myself, like where I am definitely on the side of like I love everything about that I do with Dekogon, but I also am like sometimes I'm like, oh man, I just want to make a little art. And so like I think just like carving that time out for yourself and like finding that balance it's really tricky for anybody, especially as you get further in your career. You're going to find it's going to be much more management overall, or like, you know, working with other like learners or like, you know, up and coming artists that really is going to take time away from your day in good ways though, right? Like it's very rewarding to work with artists and like get them to a place of like like levity where they're like at a really good point where they're like learning every day and they're like pushing the overall art goals. But it's like some days you're like, oh man, I just want to sit down and make a little art today. And so yeah, I think finding that balance is definitely tricky to say the least.
Totally. Yeah, it's super rewarding to see the improvement in the artists that you know you're kind of contributing to here and there with like your comments and feedback.
Definitely.
And then you know at the end of the day, it's like, oh, after 6 months they're you know dominating. And like the feedback, the amount of feedback that you actually have to give is like you know 50th of what you had to before, and there's a general kind of relationship that's kind of founded on trust and that trust is backed up by the quality that the artist is creating on a daily basis. That is really, really rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. It's like an investment essentially, right? Like you're investing in the quality of we and not me. And I think that's a really important step that a lot of artists take when a lot of people will say, oh, what makes the difference between like a mid-level or a senior or a principal or an art director or this? And it's like, I think it's when you shift your mindset, like it's no longer me, it's more we. Like what is the goal of us, not the goal of me.
That's one of the hardest things to shift to.
Definitely.
Because, like, yeah, you'll get in that position and you're like, you have a hard time trusting people. You have a hard time being like, okay, well, I can just leave this to you and you can kind of play around in your own corner and create something. But I'm going to watch you like a hawk for the first little bit, but then, oh wow, you get surprised. You're like, holy crap, like this person's like really talented. And man, that's amazing, right?
Yeah, it's super rewarding for sure. Like, yeah, it's like you've both chosen wisely the decisions that have led to this moment where you see the rewards on both ends, which is really nice to see for sure.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I really have to pee really bad.
That's all that vodka. Yeah, go for it.
That's all that vodka.
Vodka's going straight through here. All right, go for it. We'll cut this part out.
Yeah, that's
we'll
great. Or you can do it in. It'll be really interesting.
Just staying. I'm just going to edit in some like liquid pouring noises for 30 seconds.
Bathroom door stall just.
Yeah, seriously.
It's he hasn't had 2 vodkas. He must have had like 8 or 9 if he's going through that quickly.
Well, he didn't say the quantity. He didn't say 1 or 2 glasses.
True.
Jugs, whatever.
Just the whole bottle.
It's 2 bottles.
Yeah.
I thought I was past the days of like drinking at 12 p.m., 1 p.m.
Just sometimes you gotta make an exception, I guess, you know.
You can't turn down a good deal. You go in the supermarket and it's buy one, get one free.
You buy 2.
Buy one, get one free alcohol. Vodka,
Man, yeah, seriously. I wish we had that in Canada. Man, alcohol in Canada is so expensive. It's the most expensive I've ever been, like I've ever seen in any country.
I was doing some comparisons a little while ago because I had a friend that was going to Ubisoft Toronto, and we were comparing with here. And I live in a really expensive town, right? And I thought, you know what? It's going to be cheap. It's going to be so much cheaper than here because UK is so expensive for alcohol and all this. Man, it is expensive. Like Toronto specifically, even more.
How much is a bottle of Jack Daniels, I guess, roughly?
Oof, man, it could be like $23, $30 sometimes. It's crazy town. Like, for instance, like I remember when I was living in Austin, man, you could buy a beer cheaper than you could buy a soda. It's crazy. It's so nice. Like you could be like, nuts. Oh yeah, let me get a beer at lunch because like it's cheaper than ordering a soda, so I'll just get that instead.
I guess that's like, a good argument at lunch.
Yeah.
Why have you been drinking on the job? Well,
yeah, it's cheaper. Yeah, right. It's cheaper. I was just trying to save $1. Come on. But yeah, then when I moved up here, I was like, dang, it's like $4 or $5 for a single beer sometimes. I'm like, for like to buy at the store, much less to buy at a restaurant where it could be like $7 to $8.
That's it's London prices, man. Holy shit!
Yeah, it's pricey.
Yeah, it's expensive to drink.
Yeah.
It's expensive to have fun, basically.
Yeah.
We work to drink.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Do we have Lincoln back?
Yeah. I'm good.
He's here.
Cool.
He's ready for round 2.
All right. So, welcome back to the Alcohol Podcast, where we discuss. We'll jump back into kind of where we were. So, you guys were kind of talking about the mindset of switching between actually being able to manage and lead people, and that's probably a really good topic to go into a bit more detail on in a kind of career in games. Because there is a point, sort of in everyone's career at a longer term, where you probably will end up having to go into a position where you're either leading a small team, a large team, whatever it is, and those kind of soft skills of leadership are not something that you can necessarily, naturally pick up, and not everyone's a great natural leader.
Definitely.
But you guys are quite well versed in that, so it'd be good to kind of get your take on how to be a better leader, or kind of things you've picked up in your time. Maybe we'll start with Clinton, because you've got that Dekogon experience there, so give us some fantastic insight on.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, like with Dekogon, it's definitely been a learning experience. Like we've been around for about 3.5 years now, but I mean, really, the bulk of most of the contract work we've been doing has been only about 2. And so, yeah, like every year I'm learning something extremely different, especially when it comes to like management styles and like working with different kind of artists, especially like internationally and everything like that. There's like, lots of things to come from that. And I think the biggest thing, like you were saying, like not everyone is a born leader. There's tons of artists that I've worked with and I'm like, oh, this person's a great artist, but I don't see them in a leadership role just because they like to kind of either lone wolf, or they're just like, they're not really preferable to like having that responsibility to lead over others. And then I've also worked with artists that I'm like, oh, yeah, they're pretty decent artists, but their leadership skills are like superb, like phenomenal at like understanding like the context of like the micro and the macro situation, and understanding like, the ins and outs of the project and what we should really be paying attention to, and like what's going on here and there. And so I find that you start to identify those things as like a company owner, like you start to realize like what potentials people have, and also like what things people are working on and how to like continue to help them develop that. And like, I think the biggest thing like I've worked on is like, yeah, just the interaction with those people, and like also like just learning how to best conflict resolve. Like I honestly think like the biggest thing anyone will learn when they come into a management role is like conflict resolution, and how to like deal with any given situation when it occurs. Like how do you not get upset or angry or mad or frustrated with the situation? Like how do you just resolve it in the best way possible? Because as you get further into management, in your career, it's the issues are only going to be more exponentially harder to deal with as you get further, because like it's going to go from like, oh, I have a neural map bake issue to like, oh, the company is like going to crumble if I don't do this one thing.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah. So it's like, you start to really like just contextualize the relevance of like how important certain things are compared to others. And so I think just like learning to train your mind as to like how to best deal with those things is like definitely the hardest thing to learn further in your career. I think like it's not so much about like, oh, what makes a good composition. It's more about like, how can we all work in tandem to reach the absolute like best goal in mind, kind of thing.
Well, have you found that it's quite helpful to change that mindset essentially? Like, was there something that really helped you specifically, or?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing was like to try to, like, I would say like the first big turning point for me was like definitely like losing my job. Like I was like, okay, I need to realize that like I need to look out for myself in this terms of like my own security, but I also need to be aware of like like what's going on around me at all times, like what's going on in the company, what's going on with like the team. And like I think that kind of opened my eyes to stop being so laser focused on like, oh, I'm making art and like I'm just looking at my computer screen, to being like, oh, what is the goal of the company? What is the goal of the project? Like what is the goal of all of us to get to the final result, regardless of what I'm narrowing down on myself that day. And so I think that definitely helped me like push my understanding of like bigger picture overall. And then moving from there, I think just like working on like different types of teams. So I've worked on like super small indie teams. I've worked on like big production teams with like lots of artists. And I think seeing those different workflows and what parts of each works, I've kind of incorporated like different aspects of those different types of working techniques into Dekogon, and to like kind of more of like a hybrid technique between the two. And so I find that having those, like somebody asked me, one of my students in class, they asked me the other day, they're like, oh, why does Dekogon, like, why didn't you start it earlier? Like, why didn't you just like do Dekogon right away? Like, what prevented you from doing that? And I was like, oh, you have to have those life experiences to get to this point. Like having the connections, having the firm understanding of like how management styles work, like which ones work best for me, which one works best for other artists, and like understanding like just the pipeline and process between multiple studios has kind of opened my eyes to like understanding like, oh, these are the best parts of all those experiences now culminated into one, to try to provide the best experiences to my artists in Dekogon, kind of thing. So I think just being like very worldly and understanding of like multiple scenarios that people are going to go through in their lives definitely helps you to try to be the best manager you can be in that scenario, for sure.
Yeah, like, man, that was like the most eloquently worded answer.
We're gonna get the raw Lincoln right now.
Yeah, the whole time that you were talking, I was just like, oh man, I have to follow this. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think like one of the hugest things is empathy. Is like understanding what all of your artists want and how they plan on getting there. And I'm still working on that. Like I'm fairly new to the whole assistant art director thing, and like Clinton said, it's totally a learning experience. And patience is a huge part of it. And switching that mindset from I'm the guy that does the art to I'm the guy that helps other people do the art is hard, right? Because you've been very reliant on yourself to be able to do things for a long time. And then you have to kind of transition to, okay, I have 6 artists that I have to help, right? And if those 6 artists are people that you legitimately care about and you want them to succeed and you want them to, or you want to help them, then that's a win-win for everybody, right? And they'll queue up on it. They'll know that you care. And because of that, like they're instantly going to start feeling more inspired and start listening to you. And so I don't want to go much further because I'm just going to embarrass myself following Clinton's.
No way, man. No way.
Eloquently worded. Yeah.
Well, I guess the next thing on, because that's keeping the team happy and kind of the morale up and giving feedback and stuff. But how do you ensure the art direction is consistent throughout your projects? So the game you're working on at Tuque Games, for example, Lincoln, like, how do you make sure that the work everyone's producing is of the same like caliber?
I think a big part of it isn't me. A big part of it is me kind of doling out responsibilities to people and then relying on them and trusting them to help me with that job, because it's such a big job. Like, every prop that goes into the game, I don't have time to look at it and give specific feedback on that one prop,
It's
like
impossible to do that.
we have a ton of different missions, and then there's content, and then there's, like, it's not just art direction. It's like trying to figure out, okay, what does the game need to be better? So, like, it's like I'm kind of in a position right now, at least, I believe that I'm in a position where I can give feedback, not just on the art, but like kind of chiming in my voice here and there on like gameplay and stuff like that. Because like I kind of, I feel like I'm at a point where I've played enough games throughout my 34 years on this planet where I kind of understand the way that level design works, right? So it's kind of going back and forth with all the departments and syncing up with them and making sure that, everybody's on the same page. It's not just the artists, it's the designers, animators, narrative, like everybody, right?
Yeah,
and yeah, it's like, and it's like Clinton was saying earlier, it's macro, it's not micro. Like, and I have a hard time sometimes focusing on the micro because I don't like it. I'm not a prop modeler. Like, I don't like modeling individual bolts. I like figuring out how I can make the entire gun with a click of a button. Like I want to have a gun generator. I click a button, there's a new gun every time, boom, and it looks amazing, right?
That'd be epic.
Yeah, and that stuff's going to happen in like the next few years if it's not already happening right now. So, yeah, I think I probably went off on a weird tangent there, but I stand by my words.
Yeah, they're always good. Going on tangent, they're always good, and welcome on the EXP podcast. So we'll throw it over to Clinton then to have his own version.
Yeah, I think like trust. Yeah, I think essentially what Lincoln was saying is like it's interesting because like at first with Dekogon, I thought it was more about like, oh, like just get the best artists. Like that's the key to like getting a good studio. And it's like, it's much more beyond that. Like after you've gotten a good artist, like you have to like gain trust with them, because if you don't, it doesn't matter how good an artist is. Like they're like, any artist is only going to perform if they feel respected and they also feel like they're part of the team and like part of the overall goal. And it's like, if you feel removed from that, like it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not invested. And so I think like just forming those relationships with people in Dekogon and like finding ways to like form those like bonds and trust with each other, and just like understanding like you're saying, like empathy, like I understand like where you're coming from and you understand where I'm coming from and you understand my background and I understand yours, and like how can we reach this goal together, and like how can we work together to make sure that we're both like performing as best we can. And so like, yeah, just finding that balance is really tough. And like, yeah, I think it's just like you have to go from like definitely that's mindset of like, oh, I can make this art. And that was something I definitely struggled with when we first started, is like, if like someone wasn't doing it quite how I wanted it, I'd be like, oh, let me just show you. And it's like got to the point where it's like, you can't do that. You can't do that with every artist. You can't sit down with every asset and be like, let me do this for you. You got to get to a point where you're like, I can trust you to like take the words that or like the examples I'm showing you and words I'm saying to like extrapolate from that to like form your own opinion and make your own art. Like you have to just trust in their ability to produce and to do those things.
Yeah. And that trust, sometimes it takes a long time to build up, like not just from you, but from them to you, right? Because like you'll get artists that will question you, and every decision you make, they're questioning you, and you have to be able to back that up with results. And kind of like as soon as you can prove that, okay, you actually know what you're talking about, and you're making a decision that is good and it kind of follows the main game mechanics or the goals of the game or whatnot, right? In this specific way, then, oh wow, okay, yeah. And then the questions kind of stop.
Definitely.
You know, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Even though you disagree with me, I agree with you, which is kind of weird, right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I always think it's kind of funny how, like, if you think about like any class you've ever taken or any instruction you've ever taken from somebody or any lesson you've ever learned, one of the first things I feel like artists do is they check out that person's like portfolio or background. They want to know, like, are they actually good enough to teach me to be better? Like, and it's like, if you're not able to provide them like confidence in your ability to do what you're instructing them, like, no one's going to be able to like follow you. And so I think that's a really important thing for a lead, is like just to be able to be like, hey, like I would only, like, one thing I always tell my management team is like, I would only ask of you what I would ask myself to like do in a production scenario.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you ever feel like I'm overstepping that bounds, tell me so that we can figure out a better way to deal with the situation. And that goes for like artists as well too. Like you always want to like just continue to form that bond of trust, because it's like, that's really what's going to propel you both forward for sure.
It's also like, you know, oiling the pipeline of communication between you and your artist too. Like making sure that, you know, they feel like they can talk to you and be heard in a way that isn't going to come down on them, right? So for like sure. More exactly like what I was saying, empathy and trust, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I'm gonna switch direction a little bit here.
Sure.
And head back to something you were talking about earlier, where you were saying about when you lost your job and how important you realized it was to kind of always be looking out for yourself. And both of you actually have quite a big presence online with kind of side projects through kind of Dekogon and the Gumroad stuff that Lincoln does. And that kind of marketing and making sure that your personal profile is looked after, as well as kind of the stuff you do in your day job, seemed like that was quite an important thing in kind of building your career. So if you kind of be able to tell us a little bit more about how you kind of managed to market that and build that stuff and have time really to look after developing your own kind of personal brands.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing, like you're saying, it's just like understanding like there's no one else on this earth that's going to look after you more than you. And like, I'm not saying that to be selfish. I'm saying that as like a self-preservation thing. Like, you should always be like making sure that you're at least in a safe zone to continue forward with your own career. And it's like, you have to kind of look out for yourself in that regard. I think a lot of students, when they leave school, they are in this mentality of like, oh, the school's going to look after me. And then when they get their first job, they're thinking like, oh, the company's going to look after me. It's like, would be nice to think, but like, you always have to keep in mind their priority is always going to be them. Like, regardless of like how they help you or assist you to get to your next steps in life, their main priority is them in some regard or fashion or whatnot. And so like, when you're in school and you leave or you graduate, like, they hope for you the best to like get that job and like to like propel yourself forward, but that is not their like main focus, right? Like, that's just like a proponent of what they are all about, essentially. And so I find that a lot of students will graduate and they'll think that they're like owed a job or they're like owed this, and it's like, you can't think that way. You have to think like, would I hire me? Am I an asset to someone to be hired? Like, am I an actual thing to be desired in what I'm presenting and putting out there? And so if the answer is no, then like we talked about a little bit earlier, like, you should be continuing to work on your portfolio and push yourself forward. And so I think that it just really makes a big difference as to like how you think about yourself and like how you think about your work. And so I find that when I made that mental switch, that I was much more invested in like my craft and also understanding like ways to better my technical skill and my hireability. Like, essentially, like, what things can I invest in myself from a creative and from a technical standpoint that makes me a better member of the team and also a more employable member of the team. And so like, some people will get into tangents where they'll think like, oh, I'm just going to make a bunch of props and do this and do that. And it's like, well, is any of the stuff you made or worked on or pushed yourself to do, like, were those things that like you would think a company is after and looking for in a candidate potentially? And if the answer is no, then it's like, oh, why spend so much time on it? Like, try to find something that you do think that would propel you to that point. But yeah, I guess like, I feel like I'm kind of tangenting a little bit, but like, I guess like, is that sort of kind of what you're after here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. And Lincoln, what about you?
Sorry,
I know, I feel like the question kind of derailed.
Lincoln was just taking another drink, I think.
So we were
repeat the question too.
Yeah, so we were sort of talking about marketing yourself and building stuff on the side to kind of maintain your kind of presence and career outside of the kind of professional space of the day job, really.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most essential things ever. To be honest, like I started actually marketing myself. I was kind of just coasting by in my career. You know, I was at Ubisoft. I think I was at like, I don't know, fourth or fifth year. I can't remember, something like that year at Ubisoft. And you know, like I really liked my job, and I was like, you know, and maybe that part of my life was even more enjoyable because I wasn't working so much after I was done work. But I find, you know, in terms of like advancing my career and not letting it actually stagnate, as soon as I started to, you know, create tutorials, create free content for people on Gumroad, as soon as I started, you know, putting my art in forums and actually doing art on the side, all these kind of doors just started opening up for me, right? So, you know, you get companies messaging you, asking you to do interviews. You know, there was companies asking you to get, you know, maybe they wanted you to be a lead when you were a senior or something like that. So like it's definitely a huge part of advancing your career, right? And, you know, like, I don't know, think about it. Like, okay, we're hiring this guy. There's one guy that has a nice portfolio, but there's another guy that also has a nice portfolio, and he has 10 tutorial videos that show, you know, a hunger to show other people how to do those things that we need him to do for our company. Like that's huge. Okay, well, I'd way rather hire that guy that has the tutorials, right? So it's a good way of finding a job. It's a good way of building up your reputation in the game industry. It's a good way of, you know, making money for yourself on the side. If you're creating products on the side, it's a good way of building up your own business and your own self-confidence in terms of, oh, I'm learning how to talk. You know, I can talk in YouTube videos and not say every 2 seconds. It's like little things like that you're just drastically going to improve over, you know, a few tutorials. And I don't know, you just kind of build confidence, and it'll definitely elevate you to the next level. And I really feel like ever since I started doing it, maybe like, I don't know, 2 years ago, it's definitely like up to my game. Like I'm a way better artist than I was 2 years ago because I was working so hard to figure all this stuff out, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you teach something, man, like you have to know the shit that you're teaching. Otherwise, no one wants to learn from you. So it's the best way to test yourself, I think. I just wanted to come back to something where you were talking about personal work, because I know loads of people in the industry stop doing personal projects when they land a job, and we have a lot of like junior artists looking for their first job listening. Is that something you guys see commonly in the studios you work at and the places you've been in the past? Is it something that you guys have found a remedy for?
I mean, I think personal work is super important. Like, I still strongly feel like no matter what I do as a professional job, like I still have the craving to produce visually compelling art. Like I still have that like deeply enrooted in myself mentally. And so like regardless of whatever project I'm working on, I find I still have that drive on the side to like, oh, I want to make something like visually compelling regardless and to the side completely of what I'm doing professionally. And so I like doing that. That's like just something I really enjoy doing. But I think in a professional standpoint, I think doing those personal projects shows employers in the future too, like whether it be this job or the next, it shows them that you have you still have that drive, like you still have that mentality that you want to succeed, you want to, further better yourself. I think when that kind of falls off, you start to see in the production and the work they're producing that it's like they don't have the want to improve themselves as much. Like you'll find in the games industry, there's like kind of two different types of people. There's like one person that is like constantly just trying to like better themselves. They're just trying to be a good artist. They're just trying to further their career in one way or another. And then you have those that are just like, I just wanted to get in. And then once I'm in, I'm just going to coast. I don't really care what work I produce or how I better myself at that point. Oh, what you're saying?
Yeah, man. That, who are you going to want to hire? Are you going to want to hire the guy that's like the boss that like comes in there and is like, he's creating solutions for problems. He's creating pipelines for, various things that pipelines don't exist for. He's just all over the place trying to improve himself and everybody on the team. Or the guy that kind of goes in there and he's like, yeah, this is a 9-to-5. Like I'm just here to kind of maybe not do the bare minimum. Yeah, once in a while I'll have okay work, but it's like they want somebody that's capable of communicating with everybody and relaying information. It's not just about being a good artist. It's about maybe depending on your position, like inspiring others and showing them techniques and elevating more than just yourself. And I think that's just a massive part of being successful at any job that you would want to do in any career, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately that comes down to passion, right? Like you can almost describe all of that down to like passion to make art.
For sure. That's the best part about art is that you can visually see how passionate someone is. That's my favorite part about it. Is like I love when I see an artist's portfolio and they'll have like a great asset and then they'll have it immaculately rendered and then they'll have like graphic design overlay that like that has like its title and like who they are as an artist. I just think like all those attention to details are like it just really sells it to me as like they are super passionate about the project and what they worked on from start to end. They didn't like falter at any point. Like their passion just resonates through their entire portfolio. Like there's a few artists I know like that I'm just like, I just love seeing anything they post, even if it's something simple, like a really simple prop. I'm just like, man, it's just so beautifully rendered and so well put together and composed that I'm just like, this is a work of art in itself. Like I would see that. I wish I could see this in like an art gallery, it's a great thing to see.
I want the artist that after he's done, he's sitting there staring at the portfolio piece for like an hour, just staring and being like, what do I do? What do I do? That brain session of like, okay, well, how do I present this? How can I make it better? How can I improve the lighting? Oh, the pixel density is off. Oh, the lighting can be changed this way. Like there's so many, they're just brainstorming because they're so interested in it. And that feeling and seeing that in their portfolio means so much to, somebody that's potentially going to hire them if they're an artist themselves.
I've been bouncing on my chair because you guys have both talked about presentation stuff, but I wanted to let you speak. But so many people neglect presentation on their projects. Like they'll do, 50, 60 hours on a project and then 2 hours on presentation. And no one wants to see, like, you've turned this golden piece of art into like a piece of poo. And it's just so refreshing to hear both of you talk about presentation in this way.
It's so true. I feel like that's a really common like syndrome. It's like you'll see someone like spend so much time on a piece and then they just falter in the last 10%. And it's really disappointing because you're just like, you they have it in them, but it's just like, they're just so worn out from like, either working on the project or they're just like other things in their life that it's just like, they just weren't able to get that last 10%. And it's like, it can be really crushing to like an entire project because it really makes or breaks it in the last 10% for sure.
That 10% can, even though it only sounds like such a small number, it's like if the 10% is lighting, it controls the look of everything. So it's actually like 90%. So like, if, in terms of lighting, if you have crappy lighting on your portfolio piece, it's 10% of the job. You have to model and texture the prop, do the high res, all that, bake it. But then, yeah, if the lighting on it looks like crap, then yeah, the portfolio piece generally doesn't look good. So figuring out how to do that and presenting it in such a way that it looks pretty and, kind of tells the story of the prop that you made is absolutely huge. And it's worth more than 10%, even though it is only 10%, It can
almost show like sometimes a lack of impatience. It's almost like you just want to get the thing out there and you don't care if it looks, like the most incredible thing ever, but it's on your portfolio, so you move on. I find that a lot of people tend to be quite impatient with their art, whereas I tell them, just take your time. It's not a race. Try to make the art that you love and get it out there in the best possible light.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think, trying to figure out like at what point is a diminishing return, and also at what point is like you rushing art is like a thing that is only, I think, in my opinion, only learned from experience. Like that's something no one can really teach you very well. You have to just kind of like continue to gauge it on yourself. Like you have to just keep questioning yourself. Like, is this ready for visibility to the world, or do I still need to tweak this? And it's like, you just kind of have to make that decision for yourself. And honestly, I think that's one of those few things that's like people will ask what skills as an artist can you learn and what skills are in you? Like, I think that's one of those things that you learn, but you learn only to yourself. Like no one can be like, hey, this is it. You have to just kind of like keep practicing it mentally and be like, oh, I think this is ready now. I think this is at a point where I can like release this.
I also think it's putting yourself in a position where you don't have endless time. You have
yes, for sure.
I remember in art college, it's like you'd have like classes, and like when I first started drawing, I was always focusing on the micro rather than the macro, right? So like I started life drawing, and our instructor's like, yeah, you have 30 seconds. And you're like, what? Okay. It's like mind blowing at first, but then after a couple classes, you're like, oh shit. Yeah. Like, wow. It's the fastest way of actually improving how good of an artist you are, because you're not thinking about the tiny little things. You're focusing on the big things that will have the biggest impact. And, tangent once more, but
sure,
it's a tangent, but it's a good one, right? Because so many people will like look at the corner of a room and tweak that little scratch in that little thing. When they zoom out, it's no meaningless.
And then they light it and it's in dark.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's like pixel real estate, right? Like where
big to small.
Yeah, like what are you focusing on in the environment, and how can you focus on that so that combined with the whole image is actually visible, and you're focusing your attention in the right spots and making that one thing really pop, right? So yeah.
Sure. I have one, like from me at least, one last question, and it's more about Dekogon and Gumroad, like together from both of you, because you both sell products online to other users, and it's sort of blowing up in the most recent years. Like everyone's starting to sell things, but how do you, like, one, is it successful? Is it something people should start jumping into? Like two, how do you stand out from the crowd? Like with so many people putting content available online, like you can find dozens of landscape shaders, for example, but what makes your one stand out, Lincoln, for example?
That's a tough question. It's like I think when I first made my landscape shader, it really did stand out.
It still does.
Since then, it's like, Joe Gard came out with Brushify, and there's a bunch of other people, and they're like awesome, right? So it's definitely worth it. I think building your stuff on the side, in terms of separating yours from other products, I think, analyzing those other products and trying to figure out, okay, well, how can I make my product better in, maybe not every category, but maybe it's more optimized. Maybe it's more visually appealing. Maybe the performance is better. Maybe it uses later or less shader instruction. I don't know, like figuring out a way that kind of is devoted to that specific product where it gives an advantage and helps the user more than another product is a huge part of marketing any product, right?
Yeah.
Like, how am I helping people? I think, like, really, if you're going to do this stuff, you have to stop and analyze, like, how can I help people the most with this? Like, when I use Unreal, what do I need? What do I need help with? Like, if I'm doing this specific thing, like, can I create a tiny little tool that will shave off like over a year, like, 50 hours off somebody's pipeline just by clicking a button? Like, I don't know. I think that goes hand in hand with marketing as well. Like, how can you demonstrate that you're going to like help people more than another product? And if you can't do that and your product isn't actually doing that, then definitely rethink your approach.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think with Dekogon, it's founded on a few different things. Like, definitely the approach to kind of market us as it's like a family of assets and content that has a moderately similar quality of results. Like, you basically, when you're buying a Dekogon pack, you know the quality that you're going to receive. There's not like a question as to like, oh, this one might be a little off, or this one might not have been as tailored. I just find that like having a consistency is really key to a lot of clients and a lot of like buyers and stuff like that. So it's like they'll buy one pack and they'll say like, oh, this pack was great. And it's like, if they know that if they buy the next pack, it's going to be of equal quality, if not better. And so I think that's something really important to us. And then, like you were saying, like marketing and stuff is really huge. Like, not to sound too like markety or like businessy, but it's like, it's almost like a feel like buying the product. Like, you're like, oh, do I want to buy this random like, pack of like props that like I don't know the textile density and I can't tell like what's going on, or do I want to buy this like pack that like visually shows that it's like things are very consistent, things are predictable, and things like have just like this like sense of polish to it. And so I think that's really important to us as well, just making sure like, buyers understand that when they look at our assets, they know like, oh, these are like professional grade quality assets that are coming from like professional grade quality people. Like, the artists working on these understand and comprehend like what is needed to make something that's shippable for a product.
You're talking about brand recognition, right? Which like, you guys definitely have that. Like, if I ever hear the name Dekogon, like I instantly think awesome, almost, photoreal assets that are just solid. So like, you guys have that kind of content heavy, visually stunning brand recognition going for you, right?
Yeah, it definitely helps to have like, I think if anything that I learned from like my background in graphic design was just like, how can you market yourself as a better individual or company? And I think that was one thing I definitely wanted to bring to Dekogon when I founded it, was like just making sure people knew like, oh, I'm buying a product from Dekogon. I'm not just buying a random prop pack. Like, it isn't just like another thing that I could just pick up anywhere. It's definitely like a recognizable like institution, essentially.
I think that consistency that you talked about is just so important. I mean, it's like when you're buying an Apple product, right? Like, you've always bought that exact same packaging, that really well presented, and it's so key to even your own art as well. Like, having that consistency between the smallest rock to the biggest visual element of the scene is just, it's so key to the marketing part of yourself and your art.
Yeah. I think like for me, one of the big things that was like absolutely key in terms of like building up my Gumroad and whatnot was free content, right? So like creating, I created like free shaders, and I'd go on vacation and take like photo ref packs so I could give those for free to concept artists and stuff. And because of that, I was helping people, right? And it was free. It's like, oh, anybody goes here, they get 6 free items, and and then because of that, like the minute you launch an actual product, like you've helped people, and because you've helped people, they want to help you, right? It's like, oh, you supported them, and now they're going to support you through this. So it's like, it's kind of just building that relationship of like, okay, I'm here to help. How do I do that? And then and it's not based off making money. It's based off of kind of just becoming a better artist, or improving your technical skills, or helping people, or figuring out solutions for people technically. And once you kind of have that, like, it'll just kind of go uphill from there. And, the free products will kind of chime into that, and then the marketing will chime into that, and everything kind of will just get bigger and bigger, and the ball will keep rolling the more you're helping people, right?
Yeah, I guess that kind of the free content is something like a lot of people probably look over. Like they think, I've made something, I need to sell it for some cash. But I think we all know the Subway scene like that Dekogon have made, and it's free for everyone to use. And like I can't imagine how many people buy a Dekogon product after using that because they know, like, holy shit, like, this is rock solid. I need more stuff. I'll get it from them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, one of the big things for me with Dekogon was like, I said a little bit earlier in this talk, but I had a lot of friends that were just like, oh, I'm in like South Africa, or I'm in India, or I'm in Russia, and I cannot get a job in North America. Like I'm having such a hard time, or like I can't get in UK, I can't get in Euro. Like I'm just having a really hard time getting a job. And I'm like, damn, you're having a hard time getting a job? The quality of your art is like exceptional. Like what the hell? Like what the hell is wrong with the industry? And it's just like, it just was a way to afford those people the opportunity to have like, to make a livable wage and like to continue to like develop their art and be passionate about what they're into and just like share that with the world and like other game studios. So it's like, it's funny because like we have one artist that was from Russia that worked on an asset, and he was like, oh yeah, I had such a hard time getting in the industry, and then I worked with Dekogon for a year and a half, and then I got a job. And then he's like, and now I just played Half-Life and I just saw half my assets in the game. And I was like, isn't that crazy that you could not get a job 4 years ago and now your assets are literally in Half-Life? I was like, how cool is that? Like, I just love hearing stories like that. Like, it's just, it's very rewarding to me. And I think to all of us at Dekogon to hear those kind of things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That sounds like a great place to start kind of wrapping up. We do have a couple of questions from our Patreon supporters.
Sure.
The first one from Ryan actually relates to what Lincoln was saying just a few minutes ago. He's asked about how Gumroad has contributed to success and advice for an artist looking to set up their own. So I guess part of what you were mentioning about finding a space in the market or finding a way to market yourself and putting it out there is definitely a good start. But have you got any other kind of advice for someone who wants to look at selling their own products online?
Question for me or Clinton?
Well, whoever. Should we start with you, Lincoln, and then we'll jump to Clinton after?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think just kind of analyzing, we kind of talked about it the whole time, but like analyzing what you like to do in your spare time, and then focusing on that not in terms of making money, but in terms of creating something awesome that will help people. And then, once you've kind of built up your audience through kind of free products and whatnot, and actually, sorry, just on that note with Gumroad, like pretty much if you release free products on Gumroad, anytime somebody downloads a free product, they almost essentially like sign up for an email list, right? So the person that owns that Gumroad account where they downloaded something from, they can, create ads or send emails to like the massive list of people that have actually downloaded their free products. So like that's, if you're just going to cold release, a new asset pack that you put onto the Unreal Marketplace, and you don't have a pre-existing audience that you can advertise to or that you can get the word out, it's going to be really hard for that product to actually just blow up, right? Yeah. Or make you money. You might make a few $100s off of it or something, but like if you have that audience and you have people that are trying to support you because you've supported them and you've helped them, then as soon as you release something that's paid, it'll just like boom, right? People will want to buy it, and people will be willing to spread the word about it through social media and everything else. So, just don't cold release products. Focus on creating a brand that helps people. And yes, I've said that like 50 times, but I really believe in it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, totally to that point. Like, I think like, it's like we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? Like if somebody releases something and they're releasing like some kind of giant shader thing, like oh, like who is this person? Like have they been in any forums showing that they're working on this shader, or they actually are authority on this? Do they know what they're talking about? Is this like actually going to add any value to my workflow? And so I think like, when you see like Lincoln release stuff, you're like, oh, fuck yeah, this is going to be awesome. Like I know this is going to be cool when I open this up, and I know like from start to finish, the shader is going to be like set up like really cleanly and neatly and easy to understand, and like the process is going to be great with working with this. But that's because like Lincoln's like established himself as an authority within like shader workflows and like understanding that process. And so like without, like you were saying, like just like kind of coming cold into it and not having any background to like, I guess kind of like, umph to your punch to say like, oh yeah, here's what I've been working on. I've been sharing it with like social media, or like I've been working with it on Polycount or like ArtStation, or working with other artists in some regard in some kind of forum setting or Discord. Like this shows that you're actually invested into like the craft and understanding the thing in which you're creating, and therefore showing here are the results. When you just skip to the results and nobody knows who you are and your portfolio doesn't show any of that prowessness before, it's like, oh, well, who is this dude making these random things? Like, is this person actually like know what they're doing? Is this asset going to be of any quality or like addition to my workflow? Like I have no way of knowing otherwise.
That's a very good point. Yeah. About, making sure that you kind of build your own presence first before looking at trying to sell things out there. And that does kind of come back to what you're saying about looking after yourself and your own kind of brand earlier, in that if no one knows about you, they're not going to care about you.
For sure.
Yeah. And we have one other question as well. Sorry, did you have another point for?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say like, yeah, it's just like I feel like I hear that too often, where like a student will say like, oh, like I have my portfolio, but why am I not getting jobs? It's like, man, nobody's looking for you. You got to like, like I hate to tell you, but like there's no like guy out there like looking for portfolios and being like, oh yeah, this is the one I'm after. Like especially for someone that hasn't had like previous experience. And so I think, yeah, just like you're saying, like selling that experience is like, here's what I'm capable of and here's what I'm offering. It really just propels yourself forward as like any kind of social presence.
That's interesting. Like Tim Simpson actually put out an article a while ago about like why ArtStation is so essential. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, everybody's portfolio was located in the same place. Can you remember like 10 years ago? It was like everybody had URLs for portfolio. How's a recruiter supposed to find you unless you market yourself? Like, man, they cannot find you unless they just know, Yeah, that's kind of scary. Like there's heavy marketing involved if you want to kind of build up your brand, right?
Sure. You need that presence online. Like you need people to remember your name to put you in that referral box.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
There's an interesting thing that Tim actually said before. I can't remember where he said it, but he was saying about if you pursue mastery, then the jobs will come to you rather than you having to look for the jobs. So
that's a good way to think about it for sure. Yeah, it's like
that was from
you should be focused on building your craft. Yeah.
Cool. I think it rings true. So I think that's something people should follow along. Take that advice to heart.
Yeah. And our other question from Gold Panda. So he's asking about with all the virus stuff going along, people have noticed that it can be a lot more difficult to get jobs, or companies are more reluctant to necessarily hire someone from abroad than they have been before. Is that something that you think we might see as more of a pattern, or do you think the trend with work from home might change that, where companies are more willing to have people working remote? How do you see the kind of landscape of games jobs changing based on the kind of current world events? Should we start with Clinton?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of companies. I mean, like you guys have seen all the stuff with like Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, where they're just like, oh yeah, you can work from home now because it worked. Like I think a lot of companies are just really fearful of like, would this system work? Like, would we still be as productive, if not more productive? And I think a lot of companies are seeing that the success rate is still really high, like as to like how people are working from home and getting things done still. Like we were just talking about a little bit earlier before the podcast, like we were saying, like some of you guys were like saying like you work harder now because you're at home, because you don't have like the distractions that you had previously. And it's like, I think it's super important to have those social interactions and to have those like ways to communicate with your team and like those face-to-face things. But I do think there is some kind of merit to that where people are more focused on what they're able to do and accomplish in a given day when they're at home sometimes. And so I find that definitely my day-to-day is since working more from home comparatively to working in the studio, like I feel like I get exponentially more done at home. But I think studios are starting to realize that. And I think there's going to definitely be a push for a lot more remote-based studios moving to the future where people are just completely remote. Like Dekogon's been remote since our creation. We've only focused as remote, and that's our key focus moving forward. So it's like I've seen success in it, and I'm very happy with the results that we've been able to do. And so I see a lot of other studios probably finding the same results and seeing that same kind of trend moving forward.
It's pretty amazing, man. Like over the next 10 years, I think there's going to be some massive changes in the way that we approach building software.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether or not that includes VR or AR or simulating office environments. I'm kind of going into conspiracy theory LinkedIn mode. But yeah, no, I totally agree. I think companies kind of just needed to be put in that situation where this is the only option we have. And oh wait, yeah, it actually does work. I think the big challenge is going to be kind of meshing the two together for the next few years at least, because
for sure.
There's people that are really good at working from home, and then there's other people that have a hard time with it, right? They don't want to be in their apartment for 24/7, and it's kind of like setting up the office environment so that you can have the best of both worlds. Some employees can go in when they want, others can stay at home, but I think having that actually work between the two of them at the same time. For example, we have a meeting and there's 8 people in the office, but then we have to call in 4 people that are working from home at the same time. And, there's audio issues because of the microphones, or whatever it may be. I think that's going to be the main challenge when all this COVID stuff is done, for sure, right? And it's also more complicated. Some people have kids, and I think COVID just complicates everything. As soon as kind of COVID is out of the way, and people that have kids and their kids can't go to daycare because of the virus, as soon as that is kind of not nearly as much of an issue anymore, I think working from home isn't going to be as bad as it was before. I do think it's still going to be an issue, but I don't think it's going to matter that it's an issue over the next 10 years because everything is going to transition more to work from home. It's if I can lower the expenses of the company by 50% or 10%, whatever it is, depending on the size of the company, by not having a studio where I don't have to pay the real estate for a studio. Plus I can also hire people across the world, that are talented as fuck that I couldn't hire before. Like you were saying, dude, why wouldn't I do that?
For sure.
Especially if you're trying to build a business. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity for smaller groups of people to form big ideas and big companies in the future, not just because of technological advancement, but also because, because of the internet, we're capable of working with talented people across the world that we weren't able to work with before, potentially because of visa issues, potentially because of immigration, potentially because of salaries, potentially because of the list goes on, right?
Yeah. Before go to the concept of what that's been kind of set for you, because now it's the outreach is infinite, right?
Yeah. We're in a very brave new world right now. It's pretty nuts.
Really helps those artists that have their dream companies, but they can't work for those dream companies because of visas or whatever, right? And
definitely, it's frustrating. I get it. I've had so many friends be super talented, and they just can't get their foot in the door because of either say for instance, we have one artist that's worked with Dekogon a few times, and he's really talented, but he's from Cuba. He's basically screwed. He's not going to be able to get a job in America anytime soon unless their relationships improve. That's very frustrating. That's shitty. That's not his fault. But yet he's put in that scenario, and so he has to overcome. And the only way you can is working with studios like Dekogon and other, remote studios where it's like, you're able to do that. Like you're able to still produce the results and work on the games that you wanted to work on, but it's just like, it's a different capacity of that outreach for sure. I think my favorite story I've heard so far from this whole COVID thing is, I forget what company it was or what studio it was, but they meet every morning for their meeting, on Red Dead online, and then they play an hour together,
Awesome.
and then they get to work. I'm like, that's the best. You can just like all meet in like a virtual setting. You play for an hour to like get a warm up, just get a little bit of camaraderie going, and then you just get to work. I think it's so
Clinton,
fun.
like we can do that, like just an EXP me up every day for Red Dead.
It's fun, man. It's so fun. I was like, that's such a cool idea. I love that.
Or you just get really worked up because someone keeps killing you over and over and over.
Yeah.
They're trying to take revenge. We're going to give them the shit tasks today.
Yeah. So fun. I love that stuff.
That's awesome.
Don't lasso your lead. That's the... All right, and on that note... sorry.
We always start a poker game in Red Dead. By the end of it, somebody's been shot. Every day. It's always the producer.
It's so fun.
Love
Always the way. Right, well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. This one's gone on... Wow, I think we've been talking for about an hour and a half now, so it's really cool. There's been some really great stuff discussed.
Right.
So thanks to our wonderful guests, Clinton and Lincoln, for joining us today. And thank you to Pem and Luan for being here to help with asking the questions.
Always a pleasure.
Always.
If you want to be more involved with EXP or pick up more information, head over to the website, check out the Twitter, or join our amazing Discord community. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and take care.